Hey, fifth graders, we are moving on to lesson 7-3. Go ahead and grab your whiteboard marker, and have that journal nearby as well. We are talking about area problems today, and of course, we're going to throw some fractions in there. So let's go ahead and number 1 and 2 on your whiteboard. Number 1 says 3 feet are how many inches? So just remember 1 inch equals, 12 inches. I'll write this again. 12 inches equals 1 foot. Just remember that. So 3 feet are how many inches? And 6 feet are how many yards? And there are 3 feet in 1 yard. Go ahead and pause your video and write the answers to these two problems. So how many inches are in 3 feet? 12 times 3 is 36 inches. That double little tick mark there represents inches. 6 feet are how many yards? So take 6 divided by 3, 6 feet, 3 feet per yard, you get 2 yards. So what happens when we throw some fractions in there? 12 inches in a foot, remember? And 3 feet in 1 yard. So treat this as 4 and then figure out what half is. So 4.5 feet are how many inches? And 2 feet are how many yards? Remember, pause your video if needed. So let's start with just 4. 4 times 12, if you know your 12s, which you should, would be 48. And then what's half of 12? That would be 6. Add that on together. 48 plus 6 is 54 inches. 2 feet are how many yards? Well, how many feet do you need to make 1 full yard? You need 3. And so you have 2 out of 3. So you have 2/3 of a yard. All right, let's go ahead and jump into that math page. We're in lesson 7-3. This is page 240. Page 240. Up at the top, it says area problems. Find the area of the rectangle. Report your answer in square feet. Remember, to find area, we are taking length times width. So in other words, we are taking 8.5 times 5.5. So in this particular problem, we are going to go ahead and multiply. Let's start by multiplying, and I'm just going to write down all of the things that I need to multiply. So I'm going to start with 8 times 5. Then I need to take I also need to take 8 times 1/2. So 8 times 1/2, figure that out. Then I will take 5 and multiply that by 1/2. So 5 times 1/2, and then 1/2 times 1/2. In other words, by multiplying each one of those, I have multiplied the whole 8.5 times 5.5. So 8 times 5 is 40. Go ahead and make sure you have all of these written down. 8 times 1/2, in other words, what's half of 8? That would be 4. What's half of 5, or 5 times 1/2 would be 2.5. And 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 2 is 4. So let's add together all the whole numbers. 40 plus 4 is 44, plus 2 is 46. And 1/2 plus 3/4. Well, let's rename 1/2 to have fourths as a denominator. Multiply by 2 in the bottom, multiply by 2 in the top. 2/4 is the same as 1/2. So now I can take 1/4 and 2/4 is 3/4 feet squared. So it definitely becomes a lot more detailed as far as when you're multiplying using fractions. So let's go ahead and move on to problems 2 through 6. It says solve problems 2 through 6 using the method of your choice. Write a number model to summarize each solution. So here is, let's start with the first one under this blue line, number 2. A typical sheet of printer paper in the U.S. measures 8.5 by 11. Okay. Oh, nice, Mrs. Hara. Let's erase that. It does not look like a rectangle whatsoever, but we are talking 8.5 by 11. So let's go ahead and take 8.5, multiply it by 11. Please do this with me. So what we have to do in order to multiply is multiply the 8 by 11. So 8 times 11 equals 88. And then take the 1/2 times 11. What's 1/2 of 11? Well, 1/2 of 10 is 5, and then 1/2 of 1 is 1/2. So 1/2 of 11 is 5.5. Next, we need to go ahead and add those together. So if I erase this and line this up a little bit better, I can just go ahead and add. Nothing plus 1/2 is 1/2. 8 plus 5 is 13, carry my 1. 93.5 inches. The number model is 8.5 times 11 gives me 93.5 inches. Next, Kim is making a design that covers 1/4 square inch. How many times would she need to repeat her design to cover an entire sheet of paper? So let's take the area that we found out here, 93.5 times 1. She would need 4 of those to go across, right? If we have 1 inch here, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. She needs 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. That's where that came from. So now let's go ahead and multiply 93.5 times 4. So first I have to begin by taking 93 times 4 and then 1/2 times 4. So what is 93 times 4? Let's go ahead and over on the side here, show me right now what's 93 times 4. I want to see this on your math journal page. Go ahead and multiply. $372. And what's 1/2 of 4? 2. Go ahead and add those together. She would need to repeat it 374 times. Number 3. Emerson is helping his parents order tiles for their bathroom floor. The area of their bathroom is 20 square feet. They are using tiles that are 1/3 foot by 1/3 foot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a picture. And this represents 1 foot in all. So he would have to put 3 going this way because 1/3 and 1/3 and 1/3 equals 1 whole. And then he would have to go 3 going this way, 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. So this is 1/3 of a foot. This here is 1/3 of a foot. So what we need to do is take 1/3 times 1/3 to get 1/9. So what fraction of a square foot is one tile? So we're looking at just one tile, and that would be 1/9 of a square foot. What fraction of a square foot is one tile? It's 1/9. This one's shaded in part. How many tiles are needed to cover the entire floor? Well, I go back up to, it's a 20 square foot bathroom. So I'd have to take the 20 square feet, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tiles. 20 times 9 is 180. Moving on to page 241. 241, so just turn the page. Francisco and his aunt are making a quilt. The finished quilt will be 6 feet by 7.5 feet. They are using 1/4 foot by 1/4 foot fabric squares. We have to figure out how many fabric squares will fit along the 6 foot side, how many will fit along the 7.5 foot side, and how many will they need to make the whole quilt. If this represents just 1 foot, right, they would need to put 1 foot, right, 1/4 of a foot. So in order to get the whole foot covered, this would be 1/4, another 4th, another 4th, another 4th. So 1, 2, 3, 4. For each foot, she needs 4 fabric squares, and there's 6 feet. So 6 times 4 is 24. How many fabric squares will fit along the 7.5 foot side? So let me erase this for a minute. So if I do, remember it takes, there's 1/4 per foot. So I'm going to need 4 of those. 4 times 7.5. So 4 times 7 equals 28. 4 times 1/2. Half of 4 is 2. Add those two together. He and his aunt will need 30 of them along the 7.5 foot side. Now, if we're figuring out how many, there's 24 along the 6 foot side, 30 along the 7.5 foot side. So I need to take 24 times 30. Now, if I wanted to break that up and just be able to do that in my head, I could think of this as 20 times 30 and 4 times 30, which is the same thing. So I can do that in my head. 20 times 30 is 600. 4 times 3 is 12 with 1 0 behind it. So he will need 720 squares. Our number model is 24 times 30 equals 720. What will be the area? What will the area of the quilt be? And that is, we're going to take 6 times 7.5. So if I look at, let's take 6 times 7, which is 42, and 6 times 1/2, what's half of 6? 3. Add those two together, 45 feet squared. And lastly, Marguerite has a piece of checkered cloth like the one shown below. She measured one checker square and found that it was 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. The piece of cloth has 15 rows of 20 squares each. So we're going to figure out, first of all, how many checkered squares cover the whole piece of cloth. And no, we are not going to try to count them. So we're going to take, there are 15 rows, and there are 20 squares in each row. So I just have to take 20 times 15. And here's how I can think of it. I could just do 20 times 10 and 20 times 5, and then I can easily do that in my head. 20 times 10 is 200. 20 times 5 is 100. 300 squares. What are the dimensions of the piece of cloth? In order to find the dimensions, I know that each square is 1/2 inch. So I'm going to take 15, so 15 rows times 1/2. And then the other one is 20 squares times 1/2. And that will give me the length and width. So 15, what's half of 15? 7.5. 20 times half, in other words, what's half of 20? 10. So the dimension is 10 inches. And I took that by taking 15 rows. They're each 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. 20 times 1/2. So 10 inches by 7.5 inches. What is the area of the cloth? I'm running out of space. But I have to take 10 times 7.5, right? Well, let me just write that up here. Actually, I'll write that 10 times 7.5. So I have to take 10 times 7 and 10 times 1/2. So 10 times 7 is 70. What's half of 10? 5. Add those together. You get 75 inches squared. Ten times 7.5 equals 75 inches squared.